Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time. Today, we're diving into what feels like the central question of modern life. It's a question that's running in the background all the time, but we rarely stop to actually face it.
We don't.
How are the technological systems we live inside? Our phones, our apps, our feeds, how are they fundamentally reshaping the very physics of human connection?
It's the classic water we swim in problem, isn't it? We're so completely immersed in digital mediation day in and day out that we just don't notice the temperature slowly changing. We don't feel the currents shifting.
Right. We talk it up to little things. Oh, I'm just distracted, or I spend too much time on my phone. We see it as a personal failing.
Exactly. But the argument we're going to unpack today is that this isn't about individual habits. It's not about screen time. It's about a fundamental rewriting of the human operating system, a deep systemic change.
A shift from, say, a biological baseline of messy, ambiguous, friction-filled connection to something else, a computational baseline.
One that values efficiency, predictability, and simulation. And to really map out how we got from A to B, we're turning to a source that is, I think, uniquely positioned as a bridge between those two worlds.
We are doing a deep dive into the Empathy Diaries, a memoir of mind and heart by Sherry Turkle.
Now, for anyone who's, spent time in this space, that name is, it's legendary.
An absolute titan. She's a professor at MIT, a licensed clinical psychologist. I've heard her called the Margaret Mead of digital culture, which feels very apt. She was there in the room when this all began.
And that's why our mission here is so specific. I want to be really clear with you listening. This is not a standard book review. We're not doing a therapy session, and we're not just walking through her biography for the story.
No, this is a systems analysis.
That's it. We're treating her memoir, her life, as a kind of ethnographic data set. Turkle's story is the perfect case study because she was the person sitting in the corner taking notes, while the engineers at MIT were literally building the digital world we now all inhabit.
She was the ghost in the machine, or maybe the observer in the machine.
The observer in the machine, I like that. And her central argument, her thesis is, well, it's pretty provocative. She argues that empathy, that core human ability to feel with another person, it's not a fixed trait.
It's not like your eye color.
Not at all. It's not something you're just born with and then you're set for life. It's fragile.
She has a great phrase for it. She calls it an environmental achievement.
Which is such a powerful way to put it. Because an achievement implies it can be earned, but it also implies it can be lost. If empathy requires a specific environment to grow and survive, things like privacy, solitude, ambiguity, even friction.
Then what happens when we build a technological system that systematically removes all of those conditions?
Then empathy doesn't just struggle. The system selects against it. Over time, it can go extinct.
So let's trace this. Let's trace how she arrived at this really stark conclusion. Because the fascinating part of this whole story is that a deep dive into high-tech artificial intelligence. It doesn't start in a lab.
No. It starts in a very, very low-tech setting, a cramped one-bedroom apartment in post-war Brooklyn in the 1950s.
Part 1. The architecture of secrecy.
Before Turkle ever analyzed the systems of Silicon Valley, she had to analyze the system of her own family. And it was a system defined, above all else, by what she calls a regime of pretend.
The environment she describes sounds incredibly claustrophobic. She talks about this winter palace, which is, of course, deeply ironic.
It's the opposite of a palace. It's this tiny apartment she shares with her mother, her aunt, and her grandparents. There is physically nowhere to go, nowhere to hide.
But the real claustrophobia wasn't physical.
No, that was secondary. The psychological space was even smaller. Because the family was organized around a central, unspoken secret. The existence of Turkle's biological father, a man named Charles Zimmerman.
He had left when she was just a baby. Her mother remarried a man named Milton Turkle, and the family system made a decision.
The decision was that Charles Zimmerman did not exist. He was to be erased from the story. It wasn't just that he was gone. He was systematically expunged from the record.
And this creates this unbelievable cognitive load on her as a small child. She tells the story about having to live two lives.
It's astonishing. In the lobby of their apartment building, she had to pretend to be Sherry Turkle to keep up the story for the neighbors. But at school, legally, she was still Sherry Zimmerman.
She's 5 years old, managing two separate identities depending on which door she walks through.
Imagine what that does to your perception. It trains you from infancy to be a hyper-vigilant observer. You learn to read silences. You learn to look for the gaps in the story.
Which brings us to the memory closet. This feels like the origin story of the ethnographer.
It is. It's the perfect metaphor. This high cupboard in her grandmother's kitchen. She'd climb up on the table to get to it, and inside were the forbidden objects, the artifacts from the before time.
Photos with faces literally cut out of them, old books, things that didn't fit the official narrative.
She was a detective in her own home, looking for the data that contradicted the system's official story.
Which is precisely what a good systems thinker does. You don't just listen to what the system says it's doing. You look at the behavior. You look for the contradictions. You look for the silence.
And that silence around her father, that void, is something she later connects to this French psychoanalytic concept.
Le nom du père.
The name of the father. It's a concept from Jacques Lacan, and the idea is that the father's name isn't just a label. It symbolizes the law, the social order, your entry point into language and society. It's an anchor.
For Turkle, that anchor was missing. There was this black hole at the center of her identity.
And this is the crucial bridge to her later work. When the people in your life are unreliable, when the official story is a lie, when the name is missing, where do you turn for truth?
To things, to objects.
Exactly. Objects don't lie. A photograph, a book, a piece of jewelry, they are stable. They hold history. She began to invest immense emotional and intellectual meaning in physical objects because they were the only thing she could trust.
She calls them evocative objects, things we think with.
So you can see the path being laid. She was pre-wired, long before she ever saw a computer, to see objects not just as tools, but as psychological machines, as carriers of identity.
But before she gets to MIT, she needs the intellectual toolkit to make sense of what she's seeing.
Right. This takes us to part 2, intellectual formation. She gets out of Brooklyn, she goes to Radcliffe, then Harvard, and crucially, she ends up in Paris in the late 60s, May of '68, right in the middle of the student uprisings.
A chaotic time, and it's there she picks up a concept that I think is maybe the single most valuable tool for anyone listening who wants to understand their own relationship with technology today.
I agree completely. It's the concept of dépaysement.
Which literally means decountrifying yourself.
A better, more practical way to think of it is making yourself a stranger. The idea she learned from the French structuralists is that you can't understand a culture if you're comfortable in it. Familiarity breeds blindness.
You have to step outside of it.
You have to look at your own normal as if you just landed from Mars.
So let's apply that to today. Dépaysement would be looking at your phone not as a tool for checking email, but as a strange, glowing rectangle that a primate is stroking to regulate its emotional state.
That's it. You have to make it strange. You have to ask, what is this artifact actually doing to the creature holding it? If you just see it as a utility, you will always miss the systemic effects. You have to see it as an alien object to perceive how it's reshaping your posture, your attention, your very sense of self.
While she's building this toolkit, she also studies with the anthropologist Victor Turner back in the States at the University of Chicago. And he gives her another key concept, liminality.
Liminality, from the Latin word for threshold. It's the state of being betwixt and between. Turner studied these rituals where people were temporarily outside the normal social structure. They weren't a child anymore, but not yet an adult. Neither here nor there.
A space of pure potential.
And Turkle has this flash of insight. She realizes that the computer is the ultimate liminal object of our time.
See, because it's what? Sort of alive?
It's on the threshold. It sits on that messy, uncomfortable boundary between the animate and the inanimate. It's a machine, but it talks to you. It has no mind, but it thinks. It's technically dead, but it's completely animated.
It scrambles our categories of what's a person and what's a thing.
It completely disrupts them. And when categories dissolve like that, Turner said you get this experience of communitas, an intense, unstructured, almost ecstatic form of bonding.
Which sounds a lot like the early internet, the feeling of the early web of chat rooms and MUDs.
It was a liminal space. The old rules of identity, your age, your gender, your location, they didn't apply. So people felt this incredible rush of connection and possibility. It was the Wild West.
A Wild West that, as we all know, didn't last very long.
No, you got fenced in and commercialized very quickly.
So, okay, she has her detective skills from the memory closet. She has her intellectual tools, dépaysement and liminality from her studies. And then in 1976, she walks into the belly of the beast.
She arrives at MIT, and this is part 3. The shift from meaning to mechanism.
And the setting is just perfect. She gets an office in a place called Building 20.
Building 20 is a legend in MIT and hacker folklore. It was this so-called temporary wooden structure that was thrown up during World War II to develop radar. By the 70s, it was basically a fire trap that was falling apart, but it was filled with this incredible collection of geniuses. Noam Chomsky was there, early cognitive scientists, AI pioneers, hackers.
And into this world walks Turkle, a French-educated, psychoanalytically trained humanist.
And she feels the culture shock immediately. She realizes she is witnessing a war between two fundamentally different operating systems for understanding the human mind.
On the one hand, you've got the psychoanalytic system she was trained in.
Right. In that system, a mistake, a slip of the tongue is a gift. It's a jewel. It reveals a hidden truth. If you accidentally call your boss mom, psychoanalysis says, let's talk about that. That means something. The bug is actually the most important feature.
But at MIT in Building 20, she encounters the computational system.
In that world, a mistake is just a mistake, an error, a bug to be fixed. There is no deeper meaning.
She tells this incredible story from a class she was teaching. They're discussing Freudian slips.
And this brilliant computer science student raises his hand, and he's genuinely trying to be helpful, and he basically says, you're all overthinking this. This is not complicated.
He says something like, in a computer, closed is just the opposite of open. A minus sign. If you say the wrong word, it's just a dropped bit in the memory. It's a power surge. It's noise in the system. No problem.
No problem. Those two words. She says they sent a chill down her spine because in that moment, she saw the whole worldview. When you start to view the human mind as a machine, as a computer program, you strip away the history. You strip away the trauma, the conflict, the messy, complicated why.
You make it clean. You make it efficient. You get rid of the friction.
And you get rid of the meaning. And Turkle's big fear, her big insight, was that this wasn't just about how these engineers were building computers. It was about how they were starting to see themselves.
The computer becomes a mirror.
It becomes a second self, which was the title of her first major book. People were using the computer not just to calculate, but to work through their own identities. But it's a very specific kind of mirror. It's a mirror that reflects a simplified, rational, clean version of you back to yourself.
And the danger she spotted way back in the 70s is that eventually we might start to prefer that reflection to the messy reality.
Because reality's difficult, people are difficult.
And machines are so much easier.
So much cleaner.
Now, this intellectual journey she's on, this clash of worldviews, then crashes with incredible force into her personal life. And this brings us to part 4, the father and the machine. And I have to say, this part of the book it's devastating. It's almost too perfect as a metaphor.
It's the central parable of the entire system she's critiquing. After all these years, Turkle decides she has to find him. Charles Zimmerman, the man who was erased from the memory closet.
She hires a private detective. They track him down to a house in Queens, and she goes to meet him. And you can just feel her hope, like any of us would. She's hoping for a story, a connection, a reunion.
She wants the human element. She wants a father. And what she finds instead is a man who is the living, breathing embodiment of the no-problem computational mindset.
He's a rogue scientist. He's completely obsessed with his own theories that disprove Einstein's relativity. His house is just stacked floor to ceiling with his self-published books.
And he has no interest in her life. He doesn't ask about her job, her family, her story. His first question is whether she found him because she saw his advertisement in the New York Times about his anti-relativity work.
He doesn't see a daughter. He sees a potential vector for distributing his ideas. A mechanism.
A mechanism. But then it gets so much darker. He starts to reminisce, if you can call it that, about their time together when she was an infant. And he admits to her that he wasn't really parenting her. He was using her.
He ran experiments on her, in her crib.
He essentially turned her crib into a Skinner box, one of those isolation chambers used to test conditioning in animals. He would leave her alone for hours on end, measuring her levels of distress, her cries. He wasn't nurturing a child.
He was data mining a subject.
That is.
Yeah.
It's just horrifying on a human level. But for Turkle, it was also this moment of terrible, clarifying insight.
It's the key to the entire systems analysis, isn't it?
It's the Rosetta Stone. Her own father represents the pathological extreme of the technocratic mind, the complete and total dissociation of heart and mind. He looked at a human being, his own daughter, and saw only an object to be manipulated for data.
And this is where she makes the terrifying leap to the present day, to Silicon Valley.
This is the critical insight for all of us listening. Turkle realizes, my father is the prototype. The mindset that animated him is the same mindset that animates the business model of the modern internet.
The big tech companies, the social media platforms, They are the father.
and we are the infant in the crib.
They aren't trying to nurture us or help us connect in a deep way.
No. They are running the largest, most sophisticated, non-consensual psychological experiment in human history. They are A/B testing our emotions. They view our outrage, our anxiety, our desire, our joy, not as human experiences, but as resources to be extracted, as data points to be mined for profit.
Our emotions are friction to be managed or a resource to be exploited.
We are all subjects in an experiment we never signed up for. And so her critique of technology isn't just an abstract academic argument. It's deeply, painfully personal. She is fighting a worldview that turns people into things.
Which brings us to part 5, the assault on empathy. Because when she tried to bring these very personal, very qualitative insights to the institution of MIT, the system fought back.
Oh, it fought back hard. This is her tenure battle. MIT, as an institution, was very reluctant to grant her tenure. And the reason they gave was that her work wasn't hard science.
It was qualitative, it was ethnographic, it was stories and interpretations, not data sets.
Exactly. It was an epistemological war. A war over what counts as knowledge. The system, the institution, values what can be measured, what can be quantified. Engagement metrics, clicks, linear feed of transcripts, as one of her critics put it.
And empathy ambiguity, meaning those things are very hard to measure.
They're impossible to measure cleanly. And so the system devalues them. It literally selects against them. If it can't be counted, it doesn't count.
She eventually wins her tenure battle, of course, but she continues to watch this systemic erosion of empathy play out in her research, especially her work with children and the first wave of electronic toys.
Right. This is the era of the Tamagotchi, the Furby, the sort of alive era, she calls it. She would go into schools and homes and just watch kids play with these primitive robot pets.
And what did she see?
She saw that the kids weren't stupid. They knew the toys weren't really alive, they weren't delusional, but they made a conscious choice to treat them as if they were alive. They performed a relationship with them.
Why would they do that?
Because it was easier. It was safer. A robot friend won't judge you. It won't get mad at you. A robot pet doesn't die and break your heart. She quotes one child who says the robot is better than nothing.
Better than nothing, that's a sad phrase.
It is, but it gets worse.
Yeah.
Because very quickly, better than nothing starts to morph into better than anything, better than a real pet, better than a real friend who is unpredictable and demanding and messy.
It reminds me of the Eliza effect.
It's the Eliza effect on a mass scale. Eliza was this incredibly simple chatbot from the 1960s, created by Joseph Weizenbaum, who was also at MIT. It basically just mirrored your own words back at you in the form of a question. If you typed, "I'm sad," Eliza would type, "Why are you sad?"
And people loved it.
They adored it.
Oh.
Weizenbaum was horrified. He'd find his colleagues, these brilliant scientists, wanting to be alone with the machine so they could pour out their deepest secrets. They preferred the simulation of being heard to the risk of actually being heard by a person.
The simulation of intimacy over the friction of real intimacy.
And that, right there, is the feedback loop we are all caught in today. That's the system. Real empathy, real connection requires friction. It requires vulnerability. It requires the awkward silence, the misunderstanding, the hard work of repair. It's messy.
But our entire technological ecosystem is designed to eliminate friction.
To make connection seamless. But in doing so, we're not using our empathy muscles. And if you don't use a muscle, it atrophies.
So we're nurturing machines that can't love us back.
And in the process, we are forgetting how to love each other.
Which brings us right up to the present day, part 6, the crisis in perception. Because we aren't just playing with Furbies anymore. We are living inside the machine.
And Turkle points to a really specific design choice as a major turning point in this process. It was the shift in the computer interface itself, the move away from the early transparent computers.
Where you could see the command line, you could see the code, you understood the mechanism.
To the opaque interface of the Apple Macintosh, the simulation of a desktop, with folders and a trash can.
Which, made computers accessible to everyone. I love my Mac.
Of course. We all do. It was a brilliant move. But Turkle argues it had a profound psychological consequence. It trained an entire generation to accept simulation as reality. We stopped asking, how does this work? And we started accepting the interface is the world.
And once we got comfortable with that, we started applying the same logic to ourselves.
Through social media. That was the next logical step. We began to curate user-friendly versions of our own lives. We built our own personal interfaces, our profiles, We became avatars.
Turkle connects this back to the sociologist David Reisman's idea of the other-directed personality.
Yes, the person who looks to others, to their neighbors, to their peers, to know who they are and what they should want. Social media is that principle on steroids. We look to the screen, to the likes, to the comments, to tell us who we are.
The new mantra becomes, I share, therefore I am.
But the single most damaging consequence of this entire system, the outcome that underpins everything else for Turkle, is the destruction of solitude.
Now, this is a point that I think can be really counterintuitive for people. We tend to think of empathy as being about connection, about being with other people. Solitude is about being alone. So how does losing solitude kill empathy?
This is maybe her most profound and important argument. Her claim is that you cannot have a conversation with someone else until you can have a conversation with yourself.
And that conversation with yourself can only happen in solitude.
That's it. If you cannot be alone with yourself, if you can't sit with your own thoughts, your own anxiety, your own boredom, then you will constantly turn to other people not to connect with them, but to use them.
To use them as what? Distractions.
As spare parts,
Uh-huh.
as tools to regulate your own anxiety. You use them to prop up your own fragile sense of self, just like her father used her as a tool in his experiment.
So to truly empathize with someone else, to be able to step out of your own perspective and into theirs, you first need to have a stable self to step out from.
And that stable, centered self is only forged in the quiet of solitude. But look at our technological environment. It is an engine designed for the express purpose of eradicating solitude.
Every empty moment is a bug to be fixed.
The system treats solitude as a market failure, a gap that needs to be filled with content. Waiting in line at the grocery store, check the phone, stopped at a red light, check the texts. A momentary lull in a conversation, pull up the feed.
We are never alone.
Which means we are never truly with ourselves, which in turn means we can never be truly with anyone else. We are, as the title of another one of her books puts it, alone together.
And in that state, we lose our tolerance for the boring parts of human relationships.
The boring parts are where the magic happens. The awkward pause, the shared silence, the moment where nothing is being said but everything is being communicated. That's where real connection takes root, and we are optimizing it out of existence.
Okay, let's try to pull all these threads together. We've journeyed from this memory closet in a Brooklyn apartment, through the hacker labs of MIT, to the Skinner box of our own smartphones. What is the final systemic takeaway here?
The central takeaway is that empathy is not a personal virtue. It is an environmental achievement. It is a fragile capacity that depends on certain conditions to survive. And we, collectively, have built a world that is actively hostile to those conditions.
A world without privacy, without solitude, without ambiguity, without friction.
We have systematically engineered those things out of our lives in the name of efficiency and connection. And in doing so, we have undermined the very foundation of empathy.
It sounds incredibly bleak. But Turkle isn't a Luddite. She's not telling us to go smash our iPhones and live in the woods.
Not at all. Her project is one of awareness. She's asking us to do for ourselves what she had to do for her own life, to apply that ethnographic eye, that practice of dépaysement, to our own world.
To make the familiar strange again.
And to end the regime of pretend. Just like she had to finally look at her family secrets and name them, we have to look at our devices and name what they are actually doing to us and to our relationships.
So it's about making a conscious choice, to choose the friction.
To choose the friction, to reclaim the inefficient, to choose the messy, unpredictable, face-to-face conversation over the clean, curated text message, to choose the deep boredom of solitude over the shallow dopamine of the infinite scroll.
And ultimately, to ask the same devastating questions she had to ask about her own father.
That is the final provocation. We have to learn to look at the systems we inhabit, our apps, our AI companions, our social networks, and ask with cold clarity, is this system capable of seeing me as a person? Or am I just a subject in an experiment I never consented to?
Because if the system doesn't see us as people, if it only sees us as data points to be optimized, eventually we stop seeing ourselves and each other as people too.
And that is the true crisis in perception. Technology, she says, makes us forget what we know about life. The goal is not to abandon the tech. The goal is simply to remember.
The book is The Empathy Diaries, a memoir of mind and heart by Sherry Turkle. It is a powerful, necessary read. I highly recommend picking it up or checking it out at your local library.
Absolutely essential reading for our time.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind crisis and perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon. For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next. Thanks for listening.